So the new Hearthstone mini set has been revealed, and sure enough, that means I'm back to talk about some new cards, do a little card review, and of course we'll try out some new decks as well. These new cards always get me excited for Hearthstone. I know there's probably a sentiment or a meme that I don't play Hearthstone anymore. Who am I to talk about new cards? But it's not true. I've actually hit legend every month since April and have been an 11-star bonus player every month. I actually play more higher level Hearthstone now than I did when I made videos. So I think I'm actually more qualified perhaps than I used to be back in the day to talk about these cards, at least in standard format, because I'm basically finishing from like 500 legend to 1500 legend every month. This last month was actually the lower 1500 was where I finished this month, but still good enough for that 11-star bonus. So anyway, let's go ahead and kick things off here with this new Shaman card that got revealed. This is Turbulous, a new 4-mana 3/4 elemental. And importantly, this is a hunter tourist. So Shaman is now going to have access to 2 tourist cards, but do note you cannot put them in the same deck. That was already a limitation, so you couldn't kind of chain into every class, but that limitation is true even if they're both the same class. You can literally only have 1 tourist, so you have to choose between Cookie for demon hunter cards or now Turbulous for hunter cards. And that is actually maybe the biggest slight in my mind against Turbulous, because Cookie is really freaking good and gets played in Shaman a ton because those demon hunter cards, particularly all the little tokens making the charged pirates, have fueled a lot of interesting stuff in Shaman. You know, that evolve package is there, but they're also just kind of good filler, and Cookie himself is actually really good leveraging those tokens and other boards into bigger boards. So it's going to be really hard to supplant Cookie as the tourist you want to play in Shaman, but Turbulous does give you a defined angle here in that he's a battle cry card that synergizes with battle cries because he gives +1/+1 to all other battle cry minions in your hand, deck, and battlefield. And now with that kind of trio of buffs that we've seen in most of these kinds of cards in the modern era of Hearthstone, that does make him, good to just sometimes slam on turn 4 on an empty board. You won't mind because you're getting all those extra stats down the line, but can also be a little bit of a follow-up if you do already have a solid sized board of stuff. This could be like a little bit of extra damage push or, value trades, whatever you might need. He's got that nice little board buff aspect as well. So he will feel, I think, pretty decent to play. Now, that alone, we've seen these kind of buffs aren't usually enough to like be a deck or be a thing that you need extra help. But because this is that hunter tourist, you might get that in the world of hunter cards. Specifically, we do have a lot of battle cry hunter cards, which will naturally get buffed by your Turbulous. They're basically the Sasquatch core of cards. Here, I'll just pull up all these hunter cards from Perils of Paradise. Do keep in mind too, we're going to see 3 more hunter cards in the mini set that might be a synergy, but you got the chatty macaw repeating spells, you got Sasquatch repeating your last turn, you got the cheap little pet parrot. Even catch of the day is another little battle cry that might be a bonus, and you got the parrot sanctuary that discounts your battle cries, which makes Turbulous potentially even more playable. But you could weave all of this together into a deck. Do keep in mind, importantly, that the Sasquatch does not replay the battle cries of cards that it replays. So there's not any like battle cry chaining. It just summons the minions. But importantly, one thing it does do, which I actually didn't know, I actually read this on Reddit today, is with miniaturized cards, Sasquatch will replay this card and activate the miniaturized, thereby adding the mini version to your hand. So it wouldn't replay Shutterblock's battle cry, but you would end up getting multiple mini Shutterblocks in hand, because Sasquatch is going to replay the Shutterblock 3 times, so you not only get like 3 5/5s, you also get 3 extra mini Shutterblocks in hand, which is actually kind of a crazy turn for a turn 6. So your turn 6 is kind of weak because you're just like making a 5/5 or whatever, but then your turn 7, you're getting that Sasquatch and you're getting 3 Shutterblocks, like the bodies, because this is, again, your next battle cry is 3 times, so that Sasquatch's going to have 3 times, and 3 mini Shutterblocks in hand, which is actually a crazy hand too, because like now suddenly like all of these doing different things can be quite a pile of things happening in that mid to late game area. The question, of course, will be, is that going to be enough to keep up? You know, we got razzle dazzle boards of giant wide stuff landing on turn 6. We got other decks just, you know, smorking you and racing you down by then. We still got hand buff paladins getting crazy big in the mid game with those monster piles of stats. Sometimes like that down turn 6 into a turn 7 that's not actually immediately reactive in any way. There's no rush, no taunt or whatever. Probably just loses. Like, I think you just get pushed over too often with those sorts of plays. So cool in theory, but in practice, in a, you know, in a real Hearthstone meta, a lot of the times you just don't have windows to actually execute those sorts of things, which could be a problem for Turbulous in general. Like, this just takes a while for all of these stats to kind of stack up and make that impact. But I think the bigger challenge for this is actually overcoming Cookie. That said, as I've always said with these tourist cards, you know, these do create a lot of opportunity. Having access to cards can be a big deal. So, you know, even if the Battle Cry Shaman deck doesn't fit into this meta, maybe in the future there's more space. Maybe there's a slower meta. Maybe there's other Battle Cry cards that come in to support Turbulous, and you still have access to those same limited pool of Hunter cards, plus some mini set stuff that might help. But I just don't see this getting there right away, but definitely one to keep an eye on. It's not a bad card by any means. It just does a big old pile of things, which indeed can be useful. It's just that restriction sure makes me look at Cookie, man, and Cookie is a very, very proven good card. All right, so moving on to another legendary here. It's Dream Planner Zephrys. This is a 3-mana 3/2 elemental. With a battle cry, choose a travel tour to get 2 potentially perfect cards from it. And you can see the 3 different tours here. The Modest tour will give you 2 random cards that can potentially impact the enemy's battlefield. The Extravagant tour gives you 2 random cards that can potentially spend a lot of mana. And the Hectic tour get 2 random cards that can potentially deal damage to the enemy hero. So the idea here is, instead of, you know, having this hard-coded Zephrys that's trying to be super smart and stuff, it's giving you a choice of kind of directionality, and then each of these tours is pulling from a pool of cards that fit that direction. So board clear, board reaction, just like mana spend. That's, you know, not just like threats necessarily, but we saw an example that's like Archmage, Antonidas, and Mind Control. So like one of those is still kind of a reactive sort of card with Mind Control, but just big spend, big value, and then also, you know, face damage. And from what I read, these are still going to be the same pool of cards as the original Zephrys. So like kind of classic / some legacy stuff. I think maybe Hall of Fame stuff. All that's kind of confused to me now, but basically that OG set of stuff. So, you know, for damage cards, you're thinking about like Fireball and Frostbolt and probably a handful of others. For the board clear stuff, you're probably looking at like Blizzard and Flame Strike. I don't know why all these examples are mage, but here you go. For the Extravagant tour, maybe you're looking at, you know, Antonidas, Mind Control. Maybe there's like a Jiraxis or something in there. I don't remember what all was in the... I think Jiraxis was actually in the Zephrys pool, but he's also changed to a hero card since then, so I don't know exactly. But you get the idea here. And I will say, like, I think that's not great for the Modest tour or the Extravagant tour, because it's really easy for decks that need those things. They need value or they need board clears. It's just easy to get that stuff these days. Like, there's a lot of ways to generate value. There are a lot of ways to generate board clears as well. And you probably have those in your class for class specific versions or game plan specific versions that fit you really well. I will say, like, some classes don't have access to as many board clears. Maybe theoretically Druid could care about the Modest tour a little bit to find some board clears, but they kind of do with swipe and spell damage these days. It actually seems like they have too many board clears every time I play them. My boards just get wiped out by crazy swipes and stuff. So I think the one place where I could see this being useful is a reliable way to turn a card into a bunch of damage via the Hectic tour. So just tossing this into a deck that needs a little bit of reach or top end like damage output that maybe doesn't otherwise have access to a bunch, or, you know, just needs a little bit of redundancy in that example. And Hectic tour just gives them a way to reliably find a couple extra ways to slam some fireballs to the face in essence. But we have a lot of these, low cost discover a thing cards. And I don't know that this carves out a specific enough niche or meets a specific enough need when it's just competing against so many other options that do things great. And I will say too, the fact that this is giving you old school cards, a lot of those just don't keep up as well with modern day cards. There's nothing wrong with a fireball, but it's certainly not the most efficient damage output compared to the power creep we've seen in the last like 10 years, literal 10 years of Hearthstone, right? There's just sometimes faster, more efficient, and better ways to do these sorts of things. So I do worry here that Zephrys will have a hard time making a case for himself in a deck list just compared to so many great cards. That opportunity cost is a lot to overcome. So, there's always worlds where you do stuff like Reno decks and you just need enough cards, and this is a good way to fill in a slot. I'm not writing him off by any means because I think face damage isn't out, Reno decks are out, but overall, still not a crazy standout card by any means. We, at least as far as I know, haven't quite seen the pools on these cards yet, which could also dictate the quality on this. But I've been talking about some of the best case examples, and I worry that the quality is only going to go down in my mind as opposed to up when we see, what all this can actually offer. So I think Dream Planner Zephrys is really just okay at best. It's certainly nothing like the old school Zephrys that could be such an amazing tool, especially in that era of Hearthstone. So moving on here, we got Travel Master Dungar. He's back, quite fitting for a travel-themed mini set. He is a 9-mana 3/3 with Battle Cry. Summon 3 minions from your deck that are from different expansions. So this is kind of a cool little condition on this Travel Master Dungar, and you can imagine, building a deck that has some really satisfying sort of results here. This can, of course, summon, your Zilliax, your giant Zilliax, can summon a Titan. It's if you want to get a Titan, it might be a little weird because you may not want to run another cards from the Titans set, which means if you draw your Titan, then your Dungar kind of whiffs. So, I don't know that you can necessarily guarantee any one thing while still having enough redundancy built in to make sure that the Dungar connects. Do you need 2 cards per set, 3 cards per set? What is exactly the sweet spot here for Dungar to make sure that you're hitting good enough stuff, but, not whiffing on the things you really care about? Alternatively, you can't run too many giant things because obviously your deck is going to get crazy expensive and the rest of your deck is going to fall apart. So this feels like a very challenging deck building kind of thing. Now, 9 mana is also super expensive, right? That is a very late game oriented card. So this needs to be pretty much game winning or pseudo game winning the turn it lands. So you might want to focus on things that have lethality. I saw the video example, this in Hunter, summons a King Plush or whatever, can go face a little bit. That might be the kind of idea. Although in many cases, you almost want to play King Plush for his actual battle cry, right? To remove your opponent's thing. So maybe not even the best example. King Crush might just be a better example in that case. So it's what classes work for this? I think you need ramp probably because you don't want to be playing this on turn 9. I just don't think it'll be impactful enough on turn 9. So you're looking at Druid, theoretically Warrior with some new heights and that side of things. But Druid in particular seems like it could be the class that gets this down fast enough. And it might actually be there in Druid because you can have some really big swings a few turns earlier than turn 9 with Druid ramp. So if you're playing this on turn 6 or 7, that is suddenly a very, very impactful kind of thing. But then I cycle back to that same question about deck construction because you can't run small minions if you want this to be a good hit, right? You can't run 2 and 3 and 4 cost stuff. You can't run the Dragon package in Druid with all those small cards because even if you really isolated your small cards to one expansion, you're probably still going to hit one of those and maybe get 2 big guys. That might be enough, but every little kind of challenge you overcome is another downside on the actual result of this card. And it starts to feel like, man, I'm sacrificing a lot when it comes to deck building. I'm really just wreaking havoc on my deck list, and I'm getting a moderately good payoff that maybe is solid if I hit it a couple turns early, but is probably too small on turn 9. That is not something I want to try to do. I think there are so many great ways to win games late, to build crazy boards, to ensure those kinds of game plans right now in Hearthstone that you just don't need Dungar. Like in a Druid deck, you got other bigger ways to win more decisively than this. Why go through this deck building challenge? And then you've got like big decks. Big decks don't want to run Dungar if you're like cheating out big stuff. Let's say like Big Warrior, Sandwich Warrior, that sort of thing. You can't run Dungar because you don't want to cheat him into play. Like you don't want to accidentally recruit or summon a 9-mana 3/3. He's on a battle cry. So you need to actually play him from hand. So he kind of has this counter synergy with big decks. It's just every way I try to slice this card, it feels really clunky and awkward to me. It's a really big deck building challenge. And again, when you've got stuff like the Razzle Dazzle boards that are just getting these crazy big boards on turn 6 right now in Hearthstone, or the God forbid the Pain Warlock boards that are a pile of 8/8s on turn 4 or 5 or whatever, hand buff Paladin, right? That's a bunch of 10/10s, 5 giant things on turn 6 or 7. It's just too late to matter. It just doesn't get there comparative to all those other faster things. So to me, Dungar, I think this is just not nearly a high enough payoff for all the requirements it demands, and therefore I think this one's gonna fall pretty far short. I'm gonna try to make it work, but I just don't see it happening. Moving on to a little Warlock card here. We got Employee of the Month. This is a 2-mana 3/2 demon with Battlecry. Give a friendly minion lifesteal. And of course, keep in mind all Warlock cards can be played in Rogue as well, which might not be unimportant for a lifesteal card. Sometimes Rogue does struggle, getting enough life gain. It's not always true these days. They already have the drink for Warlock that can give them life. Right now they've got the big thief weapon that can give them a bunch of life potentially, so probably less useful than it would have been in the past. I think a lot of people are eyeing this card for Pain Warlock, of course. Really the best way to play Warlock right now that I've found. And I don't actually love it in Pain Warlock. Like, yes, in theory, Pain Warlock is dipping into crazy low health totals, slamming some 8/8s and stuff, and yes, you can hit an Employee of the Month on an 8/8 and heal up a little bit, but frankly, once you get into that stage of the game, you want to try to end the game as much as possible. You need threat density, and having a card like this where you kind of whiff sometimes on turn 2 instead of hitting something that advances your Pain game plan by damaging yourself, it feels like a hedge that's in the wrong direction to me. Like, the way that deck gets played, I just don't think you need this. You basically rely on your Infernals for that life gain, and it can just be, literally 14 life or whatever on the Infernal. That's just a much more efficient way to do it than the Employee of the Month, particularly because, stuff has to kind of stick and attack, and if it's stick and attacking, you're probably just winning anyway by hitting people so hard. So I think this actually kind of splits off the wrong direction in supporting Pain Warlock. I think it really wants to lean into being as fast and efficient at its game plan as it can, and this hedges you, and you just don't need that. The deck already has that a little bit with the Infernals, but then they develop 6/6 taunt threats too, which are really nice. Those don't feel bad to play in a deck that cares about pushing threats on board. So I don't really see that direction. There's maybe always a possibility for this. Any kind of minion that does AoE stuff. This could just be like a big kind of life gain card. Maybe there's some sort of imp control deck that pops up in the future. So this is not an effect to write off because it has some of that big potential and it can be a really decisive kind of line. But ultimately, the decks we see today, I don't really see this finding a home there. So this is one to maybe keep an eye on for the future that does have some potential. Just going to take a bit to realize. And then finally here we have the Druid Brochure. These are going to be, at least a few of these we saw teased. Actually, we already saw one, I think, for Priest and maybe Shaman, I think it was, in some kind of graphic. They weren't fully revealed yet, though, so we'll wait to talk about those when they do. But these are basically cards that kind of flip over each turn, and it's a different side of the brochure, and it has a slightly different modified effect. So this starts, I believe, as the Unguro Brochure. You draw 2 minions and give them +2/+2. Or when it flips over, you have the Dalaran Brochure that draws you 2 spells, and they cost 1 less. So kind of a buff output here on the Unguro side, and discounts on the Brochure side could be nice. It kind of makes this look like a 2-mana draw 2 if you think about it. I do question both of these. Like, there's just so much really cheap card draw that sometimes this more expensive card draw can feel a little bit clunky to play. particularly that +2/+2 buff is probably not going to be all that relevant, especially when I compare this to the draw your dragon cards that are in Druid. I can't think of the name of that right now. I'm sure I'll find it here. Something skies, or what's that? What's the heck's that card called? Take to the skies. That draws you 2 dragons and gives them +1/+1. The fact that that's just cheaper, particularly for Dragon Druid going into like a turn 4, where you often want to play your Nest Matron. That is like, that's how I want this to look, right? The +2/+2, like I'd rather just have it cheaper and buff less, so it's easier to weave into turns. But importantly, this is a minion tutor, so there are some weird things you could do where you have a couple really key minions. You just want to make sure you have ways to reliably find those. Maybe it's an Aulonius deck or something. You just have to have some minion tutor draw. I guess this could serve that purpose. I think I'd rather still ultimately just run more efficient card draw and burn through it all really fast, as opposed to spending so much on this for a pretty delayed stat payoff. Now, on the other side, the Druid Brochure, I like this one a little bit more, right? Being able to cheat things out early can be helpful, particularly some big Druid spells seem like they could exist. I haven't actually thought about this one too much in Warrior either, but maybe there's some ways to like find some tutored spells in Warrior. Like maybe you really want to find a Black Rock and Roll and that's your only spell, but I think Warrior already has some good ways to do that with the draw a fire spell card. So I don't even know if this would fit that home, but a possibility anyway. So I don't know, man. The 4 cost basically on these feel like a pretty clunky overhead commitment to payoffs that, again, don't really seem that good to me. Now, I know Druid has a lot of mana, but if you want to play these on curve in particular, it's going to be punishing. And I suspect if you get to the point where you do have a lot of mana and you're late in a game, these probably don't really feel that impactful either. That's just like, I'd rather just play big threats and small, cheap card draw. So I don't see any specific combos or lines of these that make me excited. They have some possibilities there because they are tutors, because they are specific to the type of draw. You might have to occasionally wait if you want to be the one who draws a spell on your own minions and vice versa. But I guess that actually adds a layer of clunkiness I didn't think about. Sometimes you won't be able to play these when you want, which is actually an additional downside. So ultimately, I don't know. I think these just look a little bit too awkward. Yeah, so there you go. Let's go ahead and give these ratings from 1 to 5 stars. Turbulous is a 3-star card. Dream Planner Zephrys is a 3-star card. Travel Master Dungar is a 2-star card. Employee of the Month is a 3-star card. Druid Brochure is a 2-star card. And yeah, that's it. Not the highest rated stuff here. I thought about giving Turbulous 4, but I don't know, man. I think ultimately we've kind of seen these effects whiff a little bit in the past, and Cookie is a really good tourist. I think it's really, really hard to beat Cookie. So I went ahead and bumped him down to 3. But yeah, not the most exciting set of stuff. Usually mini sets, though, we do get, 5 to 7 pretty great standout cards. Just not sure we saw them here in this initial set. But that is 3 of the legendaries of 4 total. So there's probably going to be 1 more tourist card if I had to guess, because there's usually 2 class, 2 neutral. I bet they're going to do another tourist. So I'm very excited to see which other class pairing we get here for the tourist. That could definitely shift things around if it opens up some cool cards. So ultimately, curious to hear your thoughts on these. I will try to get some reviews out on these cards as soon as I can. I was a little late today. But I'll try to get them out on time in the next few reviews. So thanks as always for hanging out. Stay tuned for more reviews and some decks when these hit. But yeah, thanks for watching, and until next time, game on.